Now we're ready to actually begin to start moving into our recording, and we're going to be talking about sound, tones, signal, and how to set up recording inside typical recording softwares or a typical DAW. And I'm going to try to keep this pretty fast-paced. I want to get going as quick as possible, not to be on a time crunch, but hopefully to show how quick and easy it is to get set up to record while still covering some of the fundamentals and some of the main things you want to keep in mind as you start to set up for recording. So real quick, a little bit about the setup that we're going to be using today. I'm first going to be showing you Luna, which we mentioned, which is the, if you're using an Apollo interface, which I have the Solo, gives you access to Universal Audio's recording system, which is Luna. And it's a very exciting new platform that really is cutting edge in terms of bringing that analog sound that we talked about with the unison preamps and some of those things directly into the recording software. Pretty similar to as if you were using it in a more traditional analog studio environment. And then later on, we're going to look at another DAW, GarageBand, which is a perfect, very powerful DAW for beginners on either an iOS device or a Mac or something like that. So we're going to be looking at a couple different platforms, trying to show the similarities and ultimately trying to show how you can quickly get set up to record your own music. So besides the Apollo that we're going to be using, I have some headphones. I also have studio monitors that are hooked up. If you don't have studio monitors, headphones are a wonderful way and an easy way to listen to what you're doing. And a lot of producers are even mixing final records, monitoring on headphones and making sure they sound good on headphones, because that's where the vast majority of people are listening to, even on the earbuds and stuff like that. So I got some headphones. Behind me, I have my Fender Stage 185 amp that we're going to be looking at when we look at signal. We're going to be using a guitar and talking about various ways you can get a guitar recorded into your system. I've got a mic stand there. I have the new pedals from Universal Audio, the Golden Reverb, the Starlight Echo Station, the Astra modulation machine. So we're going to be incorporating those. That's going to be fun. And I also have a couple microphones. So as we get started, again, the focus here is sound, tone, and signal. We're going to be using a guitar. That's our instrument that we're going to be recording. So we have a couple choices of how we're going to get that guitar sound and how we're going to have control over the tone, or how we're going to get the desired tone that we want into our recording system. And when you're using an amplifier, one great way is, of course, to utilize a microphone. No difference than similar would be a live performance. And that would be miking up the actual guitar amp. Now, not to get into too much detail on microphones, but a couple different options. I have here a Shure Sm58, probably one of the most famous microphones, certainly in live performance, because of its durability and ability to handle pretty much anything you can throw at it, both in signal and in just traveling and being roadworthy. This is an SM58. This is a dynamic microphone, and that's important here because dynamic microphones are going to be a great way to put in front of something like a guitar amp that is capable of throwing out a lot of loud signal, a lot of dynamic range, and a lot of sound pressure level, or SPL, which is basically just loudness. This microphone can handle it. So I've got an SM58. It's a dynamic microphone. I also have other microphones that I'm going to show. I don't think we'll be using them today, but just to give you a quick insight, I have an AKG 214. This is similar to the AKG 414, which is a very, very, very famous mic that the only difference between the 214 and the 414 is the ability to change how it picks up the signal around it. But this is another affordable condenser microphone. So some different considerations when you're using a microphone like a condenser. It needs to be powered up with phantom power. Phantom power is available on the Solo. So if you plug this microphone into the microphone inputs on the Solo, we have in the front that phantom power that I mentioned. Simply turn it on and it'll power up a condenser microphone like this. Other types of mics, I have a tube mic. This is the WA-47, which is modeled after and built after the legendary Neumann U-47, which is Frank Sinatra, the Beatles, a lot of those classic mics. This is a tube mic. So this is, again, different tone, different type of signal, wonderful on vocals, piano, things like that. You know, you could put this in front of a guitar amp, maybe put it a little bit further back, would play around with it. It can still handle a lot of volume out of the amp, but we need to be a little bit more careful with this. These comes with their own power supply, which would then be a line input onto our interface. So a couple different types of mics. We're just going to use the tried and true SM58 dynamic. And to get this set up, we're going to simply just plug it into the mic cable I have and put it on a mic stand. And I'm just going to position it a little bit off axis of the guitar amp. And what I mean is, if you can, behind here is the single driver of the speaker. So we can play around with where we're going to place it, either in the center. A lot of people like to put it slightly off the edge. So like maybe on the edge of where the speaker driver would be, somewhere around there. You could play around with different placements and what would sound good to you. But we're just going to start with that today. And then I have my Fender Strat that I'll be using plugged into the Green Rhino overdrive pedal. And then that's daisy chained, last pedal being the reverb. And then the reverb is the one that's going out into my amplifier. Then of course the signal is being amplified. It'll then be picked up by the microphone, and then the microphone is plugged into input number 2 on the Apollo Solo. All right. And so it's very easy on an interface like this because I see a monitor button, which is what I'm on now. So it's showing me the level coming out of my headphones so I can hear it. I have my monitors cut right now, or turned off, so we can just use the headphones since we're using a microphone. And then I can switch over to preamp, okay? And it shows me channel 2, which is my mic input, which is the one we'll be using. And it shows me that it's a mic input, okay? 48 volts, which is the phantom power is turned off. I don't have a pad on. I don't have a high pass filter, and I don't have phase invert on, okay? The high pass filter, what this does is many microphones have these and many microphone preamps have these, because what it does is it removes low end. So it allows the high pass frequencies to go through, and all the real low end is filtered out or removed. The reason why you might want to do that is in the case of a vocal, especially for example a female vocal, or perhaps an acoustic guitar, there's not a lot of low end fundamentals in the sound. So if we talk about frequency range, those lower frequencies we don't need in a female vocal or in an acoustic guitar. Now, after we record, we'll see how we can pull up plugins to remove that, but sometimes people like to put a high pass filter so they don't even get recorded and you don't have to worry about it. And you might not notice it and you might not think it's a big deal with one voice or one vocal or one acoustic guitar part, but over the course of recording a lot of material in a track and having lots of tracks recorded, that low end unwanted noise starts to really add up and create what is referred to as muddy sounding mixes or muddy songs. And a lot of that is that unwanted low end. So we'll always want to be aware of that and look at how we can remove it, either with a high pass filter on a preamp or with a plugin, which we'll look at later. 48 volt phantom power we don't need because this is a dynamic mic. Pad we don't need. All a pad does is reduce the volume level going into the preamp. So if your amp is cranked up super loud and you love that tone and it's hitting the preamp too loud and you're getting that clipping, you don't have any headroom, you can hit the pad and that'll lower the volume right here without having to change any of the sound parameters you have on your amp or anything like that. Polarity invert or phase invert is something a little more technical. We don't need to worry about it never really when we're doing a single instrument. The only time phase comes into issues is if you're recording a sound source with multiple microphones, and that gets a little more advanced. But really quickly, when that would come in handy is, let's say you have something like a snare drum where you're putting 2 microphones on it, one on the top of the snare and one on the bottom. We'll want to use the phase invert so that those microphones capture a phase coherent signal, okay? Because when we get into signals that are out of phase, they can sound really bad. So we don't need to really get into too much detail on that, but that's a little bit of insight of a situation where you may use phase invert. Okay, and then we can link them. If you have a stereo input, you can link the inputs so that they both do the same thing when you push the buttons. So we're on the mic. Okay, we've got this set up. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over there and start to get some sound happening from the guitar. Okay, so I got my guitar now. Now let's talk about signal, source, tone, all those types of things of what we're actually going to be recording. We're going to be recording this guitar. So I have my volume knobs for the pickups, and I have my tone knob, and of course my tone select from the mix of the pickups. Okay, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but basically, if you're a guitarist, you know the tone you like, you know the settings you like, you know where you like to have these. The only thing worth mentioning, when possible, it's preferred to have the volume on your originating source as loud as possible. So if it's a guitar, we want this to be turned up to the max if possible. Same thing with a synthesizer. We want the maximum output of the volume going. And now we're going to get into what we talked about earlier, like gain staging. So we talked about gain staging. And gain staging is looking at the gain or the volume throughout your signal flow. These are some of the terms that we talked about earlier in the other video. So we want the max gain coming out of our source. And the reason being is there are multiple stages where we have gain. We have gain on our guitar, turning up the volume. We have volume and gain on the amp. And we have gain on the mic input. That's 3 sources of gain. If my guitar is down super low, then I'm going to be turning up my amp really loud. And if my amp is low, then I'm going to be turning up this interface input even louder. And where you can run into problems is that the signal is low, too low, and so everything becomes more noisy. If the amplifier is trying to crank up a low signal, you're going to hear more noise. If the preamp is jacked all the way up because you have a low signal coming into it, you're going to be introducing more of that noise, the noise floor, like we talked about, that signal to noise ratio. We want more signal, way more signal than we want noise. And the best way to prevent that is that the sound source we're going to turn up as loud as possible. And then we can set our amp to whatever we want. I have a clean tone. I'm on the clean channel here, and I've got a volume, not set too high. I've got my treble and mids and bass kind of where I want them set there. And then right now we don't have any pedals turned on, so it's just a really clean tone. And then I can see volume coming in and level coming in on channel 2 on the Apollo interface. And now using this dial, I can turn up the gain and get the gain staging set to where I want. So it's going at about -9, and I'm hitting the guitar pretty good. And I still have headroom. So that works, all right? So we gain stage this pretty good. We're up loud here. We're up a decent amount on the amp, and we're coming in from the microphone, the SM58, picking up the sound coming out of the amp, going into the preamp and the solo on channel 2. And I'm looking at the level to make sure I have enough headroom. Now that we have our clean tone, now let's set up the recording inside the computer. So I've launched Luna, and this is the launch screen. And you can watch tutorial videos and explore some learning materials right here on the right-hand side. But off to the left-hand side, this is where we're going to create our new project. So we can give it a name. And we're going to be working on the song called Good Luck today. We're going to call it Good Luck Guitars. Now, I know the tempo, and we'll talk about that later. But we always start with the tempo. Now, the good news is you can set it up here as you set up your project, but it's very easy to change as you open your project as well, which I'll show you. So we're going to do 112 as the tempo. And then the location of where this song is going to be saved on your computer is very important. Having the data management and knowing where all your projects are. Now, by default, Luna puts it into your music folder on the user side of your Mac, and it puts it inside the music folder in a Luna Sessions. So all of the Luna Sessions by default will go here. If you really get into a lot of recording, I would recommend getting an external hard drive and dedicating that to all of your recordings. And it would be as easy as navigating to whatever hard drive you have plugged in, and then picking that. For example, I could go up here, navigate to a hard drive, and save it there. But it's fine in the default location, so I'll put this back to Luna Sessions. So we're going to save it there, Good Luck Guitars, and then we're going to click Create. And this creates our project that we can get started. Up at the top is our transport. We'll go over just a couple little interface things. We have our transport that we talked about. So we have go to start, go to the end, stop, play, record, and cycle or loop. We also have a counter. We have a click with a metronome. You can turn the metronome on and off by simply clicking the little metronome icon. We have our tempo. So if you didn't set it up when you started your project, you could just double click here and make a change to whatever you want. And then down below we have our timeline. And this is what I was talking about in our terms. And this is a great visual view of our song in bars and beats. It also has the minutes and seconds below. It's got the tempo, the time signature, and you can put various markers like verse, intro, chorus, whatever. And then we have our main track. So this is the initial layout. And what we're going to do now in order to get that clean tone in the first tone inside Luna is we're just going to create a new track. So over here to the left, it says what type of track do you want to create? We can choose audio instrument, which would be a virtual instrument like the piano that I showed you with the MIDI controller that will control that, or a bus. But for right now, we're just going to keep it simple. We want to record the guitar, so we're going to do audio. We're going to do a format of mono. Again, the source dictates that usually. We have a mono instrument going into an amp with a single microphone going into channel 2. So that is a mono source. And we can name it. So let's name it Guitar 1 right there, and we'll click OK. So then it opens up this guitar track. We have a little slider for the volume right here. It also does the same down here, which is our traditional fader right there. And I can hold down Option and snap that exactly back to 0 if I want. And then we have our input and our output. So this is going to be where we're going to set the input of the interface to look in this track. So if I click that, notice I see 8 inputs and then 2 other inputs down at the bottom. So I see mic line, high Z, 1, 2, and then line 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then B, mic line. And the reason I see this is because, as I mentioned, the Apollo interfaces are expandable. So I have my Apollo rack, and I also have plugged in the Solo. We're going to be using the Solo today for recording, but it's all as if it's one I/O system, which is wonderful. And I can literally just unplug that, and it would only make the Apollo Go interface available. So these are my Solo inputs, and I'm just going to select mic line 2 right there. And then if I pick up the guitar, and we turn on the input, which is going to be listening to the input of our interface. And there we go. So now we had headroom visually on the Solo meters right there when we're looking at the preamp channel 2. Now I have an additional visual meter reference right here, and I can actually quantify that a little better now when I play. So it's going up to about -12 or 9, okay? And you can see, as we talked earlier, 0 dB is that loudest point before we have clipping. So we don't want to go anywhere near there. This is going to be the last step for setting up to make sure we have enough headroom. So I have nice headroom there. If we want, we can turn this down a little bit or up. Don't spend too much time getting it perfect. Just make sure you have enough headroom. Make sure you have enough healthy signal. Anywhere between -15, -12, -9, something like that is plenty. So we have that. And now with this clean tone, okay, if we wanted to, I could turn on the click. What I'm going to do is, because we're using a microphone for this first tone, I'm going to put on my headphones and turn off my monitor speakers, because if it was playing out the speakers, it'd be picked up on the microphone. So I'll put on my speakers here. Okay, so now I can hear that in there. I can turn up my headphones a little bit. And now as I play this, I hear the metronome. So now to record, it's as easy as hitting the record button up here, hitting record in the transport, and then play, and we're recording. So there is our very first recording that we did, and we can play this back after we turn off our record enable. So there's our first recording, okay? So we have our first basic tone right there.